there is the seeking for the one place of rest, of certainty, of the one truth. And then there's the seeking out of like curiosity. Like for me, it's like seeking out more stories because it makes the world more rich and kind of infuses my own worldview with more richness and depth and complexity. And that to me, that's the beauty of this world.
The the quote which I should have on my desk here, which I think I can quote from Hillman, the best thing that James Hillman ever said for me. I didn't notice it. It's in Dream in the Underworld, which I think I read two or three times, but I didn't ever notice it until the last time I read it. I was preparing for a class over at the College of the Atlantic some years ago now, maybe 15 years ago. And I was just zipping through it, and bong, there it was. And this is the quote about what he calls in that context the loving that we give to images in dreams. The immediate context in his book is you've got these two people, the therapist and the analyst Sand, or whatever you want to call it. You get the two people. My friend Nicholas Pearson calls them the fellow travelers, which I like very much. So you got the two fellow travelers, and they're talking about a dream. And Hillman says there's a kind of loving in dream work. And he says, let us call it imaginal loving. At which point, I want to drag that out of its Hillmanian context and generalize it, as Hillman would do, as Jung would do, because everything is an image. Okay, so let's imagine a loving. He says it's not seeking for union or stability as we are so tediously taught. The kind of loving that's appropriate to images allows us to explore more and more widely, to extend the intricacy that intensifies intimacy. Ah,
Boom. Oh, I got the chills.
boom.
That's it. That's
That's
it.
it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's the distinction in kind of types of seeking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I read that. I hit on that, whatever it was, and that gave the title to my last book, Imagine Love, because
Yeah.
that's it. That's it. To explore more and more widely, to extend the intricacy that intensifies intimacy.
Oh,
Um,
it's great. It's
that's
so
that's
good.
pretty much the whole thing for me.
Yeah. Like, what are we
And
here
so
for? That.
my psychocosmology is an attempt to envision the kinds of counter technologies or technologies of the sacred, if you want to borrow from Jerome Rothenberg, that follow from that vision of reality. And there are
Hmm.
going to be lots and lots and lots of them. And so the shortest possible version of my psychocosmology is, and the hardest part, you take everything that you learned in college. Let's just stick with the sciences, right? And let's just be me, and we'll stick with physics and biology, and all the things that you learned that you, by God, know are true in some sense. I mean, I could teach that stuff and be very persuasive because it's wonderful and it's fantastic and it's well nigh infinite. Geology and cell biology and I mean, it's just the greatest thing. You take all of that and you put it in a little compartment inside the mundus imaginalis. And that leaves everything else. I mean, it overlaps with everything else because what you begin to realize is that all of these other faculties besides the rational one that you pretend you're using when you're doing sciences. There's
Pretend. Yeah.
all these other faculties are operative. It's just that when you do your dissertation, you can't talk about them. Footnote, right? So I wrote my dissertation. We don't have to talk about it. And in the text of the dissertation, I said that something was extremely interesting, and my committee said you can't say that. And I said, well, why not? He says, your reader might not find it interesting.
Right. It's so subjective.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine, I'll take it out. I mean, that's a great example of the kind of,
Yeah.
bullshit nonsense. Um,
Yeah. The
and
illusion of
so,
objectivity. Yeah.
yeah, and for someone who was raised and studied philosophy and did science and all the, to be able to do that, put that aside and put it into this bigger, that's really hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's just like a kind of a move of the mind to think that you're putting it inside the larger thing because it's already a part of it. It's already a product of some larger cosmos. And so, how could it possibly encapsulate the thing it's within? It can only reflect it in a limited way. But that's a cosmic vision, right? Or
It is. It is. Case in point, I worry. It took me so long to crawl out of the fundamental assumptions that are part of the scientific worldview. The primary one being that we can understand the world.
hmm,
That's If you're not willing to give that one up, then the rest of this makes no sense.
hmm,
You have to begin with something akin, although you don't have to be this extreme, but if Corbin calls it mystical poverty, you have to
hmm,
begin thinking, man, this is a lot. I can't possibly understand it all. And that's where most people were for most of human
yeah,
history until, I don't know, sometime in the early modern period, guys with mathematics and things started to think, yeah, we can totally understand this because our minds have been given by God and we can, and whatever happened. And we got to the point where, well, of course we can understand the world. I mean, of course we can. Look what we can do, right?
yeah,
It, man, you've got to get that out of your head. And I worry that because I had such trouble seeing that, I, I'm really sensitive to the fact that many people will have similar problems. Okay.
hmm,
And so I, because I'm interested in these things and because all hell is breaking loose, I've been paying a lot of attention to the debates about artificial intelligence. Um, and in my version of reality, this is one place where the two worlds collide. 30 years ago, when we set up the program in environmental studies at our little tiny college, 35 years ago, I used to I used to use two texts as sort of archetypal examples of this kind of conflict. One was a book by a guy whose name I forget, called Goat Walking, and he was a goat herder on the Mexico-Texas border, as I recall, and he was highly intellectual, and he wrote a book about goat walking, and it was kind of an echo of the Old Testament. I'm not sure that he was Christian. I think probably he wasn't, but his vision of humanity was in that mode, the pastoral, nomadic herder.
Hmm.
And he was I remember the book being quite affecting, you know.
Right, Jesus, the shepherd of men, and all
Yeah,
that
yeah,
stuff, right?
all that stuff about this is how you be maximally human in the world. You
And
know,
that's
you
kind of like the myth of human as steward of the world, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's beautiful like that. You know, the Wendell Berry, if people still know Wendell Berry's writings, or Gary Snyder, you know,
Hmm.
that kind of vision of what makes a human human. And then the other thing I used to assign was Marvin Minsky's little essay, Will Robots Inherit the Earth? And Minsky was at MIT. He was the head of the whatever they called it lab at MIT back in the 60s and 70s. And he was proposing that the obvious, you know, destiny of humans was to download your intellect into a computer and take off for the stars. And I set these two, you know, next to each other for my students, you know, just to sort of, you know, make that point that there
Hmm.
are options here. There are different ways of conceiving of what it means to be human. And of course, it's Minsky is the precursor to Elon Musk and you know all
Yeah,
these
Kurzweil
crazies.
and yeah,
Yeah,
all the
yeah, all of them,
transhumanists.
all of
Yeah.
them. And
Hmm.
then just I let me get this off my chest. And then I was at Santa Fe Institute in New Mexico in 1990 for the first complex systems summer school, which was really cool. Um, and the second year I was there, or the third, during the summer, they had the first uh, artificial life conference. And in the moment, I can't remember his name, but one of the presenters um, did a presentation called "Artificial Life," not computer, because he was talking more than computers, but artificial life, the coming evolution. And he's just echoing Musk and these people. This was in 1992, maybe. And he said, look, you know, eventually we're going to figure out how to do this. We're going to make artificial life. It's going to develop on its own. We'll give it some stuff. It will drive us extinct and it will take off for the stars. And this, he thought this was just, it will be our children. And this was just the
Hmm.
greatest thing. And at the time, you know, decades ago, at least half of the audience thought, "Oh shit,"
Yeah.
you know, and now here it is. And
Yeah.
so I've been primed for this for decades. And yesterday I was listening to Chris Hayes. Why is this happening? And Chris was. And let me finish my little rant here. And Chris Hayes, you know, the nightly news guy, I guess, although I don't have TV. He was trained in philosophy. I forget where he went, but he knows philosophy, and he was interviewing a guy whose name I forget, who just wrote a long article for the New Yorker about the AI gang in San, you know, out on the coast. Um, and I like Chris Hayes. He's really smart, but he was voicing the exact reductive Darwinian vision of humanity that it has taken me decades to escape. And I just wanted to kind of shake him and say, no, 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 don't be a reductive materialist, which is exactly what he said he is. And I just thought, yeah, the point I'm trying to make is that there's an awful lot of people for whom the psychocosmology of the sort that you and I are trying to articulate is just total nonsense. It's just absurd because we know all these things from
Yeah.
science. We just know them. And
Hmm.
I've been over there,
Hmm.
you know, and I know what that feels like. What's the point of this? The point of it for me is to part of the point of it for me is to recognize the radical nature of what you and I are proposing from the point of view of that part of the modern culture.
Hmm. Yeah, I always come back to these two questions that Hillman would ask, after he would point out that everyone is living a myth, whether that's the myth of developmental psychology, the myth of scientism, the myth of Christianity, the myth of transhumanism. You're living a myth. Okay, once you've got that, then you can ask yourself these two questions. What does it do for you? And what does it do to you?
Hmm.